Good morning, and let me begin by stating how glad I am that eventually I was able to participate in this exchange. It was a bit of an off-on business, and at one stage, in fact,
I think you might still need.
yeah. Oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah. At one stage, in fact, I thought I would have to send a video text because there was a bit of a clash of confusion. And then something happened again just a few days ago, but I thought, no, I can't give these people heart attack. I just must come over this morning. And that preliminary is to excuse myself, to warn that I will have to leave immediately after my my keynote address. But I know that you're in very, very capable hands, and that the discussion will continue to be lively. I didn't even tell my hosts earlier because I didn't want them to start fainting or anything of the sort. I just decided that it's here. I'll reveal to them that I have to leave immediately after my address. In fact, I sent them a note at one stage. I said, I'd like to have an order of events. I also want to know how long you want me to talk. And I got a note back, very ambiguous kind of, well, not ambiguous. You see, we have to look in the mirror occasionally and compare ourselves to what is happening to other people. I should mention that during this so-called, this ludicrous Gilbert and Sullivan opera so-called coup with some Mark IV rifles bought on the rough market. I mean, they needed to come here and see what coups are like. I mean, coups should also have some self-respect. That part was not a military coup at all. But it's important for us to know that even while there were spouting religions, because there are so many lessons in that episode for us, while there was spouting religion and revolutionary rhetoric, what was really their background? I quote, they had squatted on land, and the government was in constant quandary as to whether to throw them off it. So they had taken over some land that belonged to the government and built on it. So Selwyn Richardson, Minister of National Security, it was his job to figure out how to deal with them. Eventually, he did. He did not, I beg your pardon, he did not throw them off this land, but had made them stop building, thus earning their wrath. Now, maybe that recalls something in your minds, the takeover, very close takeover of the nerve center of the security services of this nation, the Inspector General, the headquarters of the Nigerian police force, by what was then nothing more than a ragged bunch of insurgents like these very people. The bombing of the United Nations headquarters, the bombing of various media houses, etc. This exactly was how it started. If we don't learn lessons from other people, we never will succeed in recovering just who we are. And I should add that the Minister of Defense in that so-called coup in Trinidad was shot in the leg. I consider that shot, however painful, a far more honorable wound than the wound sustained by our Minister of Defense, who shot himself in the mouth with some unacceptable language, commentary concerning the rampages of the Fulani herdsmen. What did you expect them to do? This is after people had been killed in figures of hundreds. What do you expect them to do if you block their route? This is addressing victims of Fulani herdsmen. This is addressing issues of rape, rapine, of massacres, of the takeover of farmland, the takeover of villages all over Benue, Taraba, etc., etc. Land grabbers are trying to build on a piece of land that is not theirs, and you obstruct them. What do you want them to do? Farmers are squatting on land from which they derive their food and complaining, daring to complain, that cows were trampling on their farms and eating their food, their crops. So what do you expect the cow owners to do? And of course, let's not forget the abduction of the girls. The latest, Dapchi. It's their fault. Didn't they know that Boko Haram doesn't like girls going to school? Stupid girls, stupid teachers, stupid parents. It serves them right. It's very strange to be able to say outside the world that that Minister of Defense is still in Buhari's cabinet. This is not about sentiment. I get impatient when I hear complaints such as, Buhari has failed to go and sympathize with the people of Benue, with the people of Nasarawa, with the people of Plateau or wherever. Who needs sympathy, presidential or whatever? Is it sympathy that will reorder their broken lives? Is sympathy the issue? We are speaking here of one eternal commodity that is fundamental, a fundamental human deserving. Justice, that's what we're speaking about. Sympathy with or without the ostentatious laying of wreaths at the mass graves of victims by the new messiahs. Sympathy is an ordinary commodity accessible to all of us. We're speaking, however, of a people's need for security, and where the structures for that fail, bringing perpetrators to book, even while emplacing deterrent measures against repeat. We're speaking of governance will and responsibility, the readiness to respond with massive punitive action when the fundamental security of a people is violated. We're speaking here of a president showing up at the arena of human desecration, not to shed any unctuous tears, but to read the riot act and give orders right on the scene of violation. Order his forces into action against the arrogant, bloodthirsty renegades of society who wallow in the blood of others, having been assured some way or the other of the cloak of impunity. We're speaking of the courage to decree such monsters terrorists and enemies of humanity with the same dispatch as the declaration of far less violent, far less destabilizing movements, albeit disruptive and supranaturalist and sometimes nasty in their attestation and activities. We're speaking, in fact, we're speaking for a culture of even-handedness. Let me stress yet again and again, without ambiguity. This is not a question of whether or not one is against or one agrees with the direction and methods of the mass-up movements, IPOB, OPC, RAY. That is not the issue. The issue is stark, unambiguous, and unchallengeable. It is simply this. An organization has been rampaging up and down the nation, armed to the teeth, descending on innocent villages, etc., etc., etc. Their spokesmen appear on the media, unrepentant, distorting history, mangling the sequence of cause and effect, calling on government to rescind their laws, state governments or else, and then suiting the action to the word. Proceeding to defy such laws, then proceeding to threaten continuation of the same acts of depredation. A nation has been placed on the defensive simply because of the failure of governance. Have you ever encountered a more cynical rendition of the sequence of cause and effect when spokesmen for these organizations, these associations, come out and say, no, the killing is taking place because of laws which were made to stop the killings that had taken place? I mean, such cynical double talk and blatant. And I've not heard that even such a being has been summoned for questioning, unlike far more pacific protesters all over the world. But let's pause there for a while. Let's pause. You see, sometimes I weary of the short memory of this nation. I'm back now to this issue of presidential presence where and as necessary. Have there or haven't there been precedents in this nation? Does it help us if we discern, identify a pattern, a seeming tradition of power alienation? How long ago was it that in this very nation, in fact, in this very city, Lagos, in the bustling commercial capital, a section called Ikeja, the National Armory went up in serial detonations, lobbing bombs into both commercial and residential areas. I visited the scene afterwards, saw gaping holes in roofs of homes, including that of our literary comrade, J.P. Clark. He had a huge hole gaping where a bomb came through the roof. Ikeja was in collective panic, not knowing what demons from hell had descended upon them. Hundreds drowned in the canal in Ikeja, that weed-covered canal, in a directionless flight to save their lives. The bombardment had registered in their minds not even as a coup d'etat, but as an invasion. It was so heavy, the bombardment, prolonged and indiscriminate, that they could not believe that this was just a coup. And what was the government doing? Yes, the president at the time, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Olusegun Obasanjo of this nation, he did visit the scene of carnage, but it would have been much better if he had stayed away. Because when he got there, and the bedraggled survivors sort of surrounded him, pleading for help, protesting, all they got in response were words from bared teeth and a snarl and a further devastating barrage. What do you want me to do? I am not obliged to be here. We forget things very easily, you know. Well-spoken, doctor, general, ex-president. That sterling model of leadership has survived with vengeance. Your immediate successor, whom you boasted you yourself emplaced single-handed, with a little help from God, I think he admitted later on, he took, in turn, the same model of governance. That's President Jonathan now. Waited for nearly 3 weeks to accept the fact that 270 plus of our children have been abducted from Chibok village. They insisted it was all a ploy by the opposition to discredit his government. And thus, precious days were lost when those girls could have been saved. His wife proceeded to stage one of the most nauseating acts of incoherent, tuneless, meaningless, and purposeless investigative charade ever witnessed in this world. Anyway, the business of clownery is very lucrative these days, so I think let me backtrack a little and reveal something to you here. Go back to the former president. I called him up and complained, protested to him. I said, I think over the phone, I'm not sure, I don't want him to call me a liar. Either met physically or it was over the phone. I used to phone him at that time. People think we don't talk to each other. We do, you know. So I called him to chide him severely on his reaction. I said to him, you want to be accepted as a political leader, and you do not even accept that it is your duty to have been there at a scene of disaster, created, furthermore, by your own military. Did you actually utter those words? I asked him, did you actually utter those words attributed to you? His response remains a riddle to me till today. His actual words, the exact words, not easily forgotten, I assure you, was his words were, Kampala tienie. That is your own Kampala. As the saying goes, this is one of those enigma wrapped in a conundrum which I have not succeeded in untying till today. I've tried to decode it in so many ways. All I could arrive at was simply a repetition of the same expression, Kampala tienie. Well, whatever the origin or the strict translation of that expression, it nonetheless takes us back to the nation's latest Kampala, named Dapchi. And here I must express how gratified I was by the reaction drawn by another and contrasting event that took place not far from Dapchi, and where that presidential declaration, I am not obliged to be here, would have been more appropriate. This contrasting yet complementary event took place not long after, indeed so close to it, that the presidential apologist, incumbent that is now, when finally stung by criticisms, felt obliged to try and corral it into service as a divinely prescribed therapy for the trauma that was inflicted by the Dapchi slap in the face of the nation from the chronically bloodstained hands of Boko Haram. They said, oh yes, that wedding was a needed therapy for the trauma undergone so recently by the abduction of those girls. Now, that's what I call blasphemy. I'm not a religious person, but that is blasphemy. Alternatives were never in supply. I'm talking of the Kana wedding. There were so many formula that could have been adopted to ensure that the couple still had their wedding without the accompanying exhibitionist lavishness so soon after a national calamity. And each of those options eliminated the presence of a president who had yet at the time to respond with his own physical authority to scenes of human carnage close by. It's as elementary as that. The nation was in mourning. A quiet wedding by the pair and then celebrations afterwards wherever. Dubai, I understand, is a very interesting spot these days, and both parents could have afforded that and saved us that slap in the face after disaster. It was one of those instances when Obasanjo's formula would have applied, when the president, Buhari, should have said to them, not just that I am not obliged to be here, but that I am obliged not to be here. It's as elementary as that. Now let's see if we can find our way back to Haiti, after all that meandering. Haiti, let us recommend, was that island which suffered, speaking proportionately now, for size, in relation to population, landmass, one of the greatest human disasters in recent human history. It's estimated that over 200,000 people died, but 250,000 dwellings, some ramshackle, but dwellings, habitations, were flattened. The center of the city was dead. Hospitals, dead. Factories, etc., etc., etc. No need going through the statistics of loss. Let us all use our imagination to try and recollect what Haiti became after that earthquake. There was chaos, of course. There was some looting. But see what the ex-president, American president, stated when appealing worldwide for assistance. I quote, Former US President Bill Clinton acknowledged the problems and said Americans should not be deterred from supporting the relief effort should not be upset by upsetting scenes such as those of looting. Lieutenant General P.K. Keane, Deputy Commander of U.S. Southern Command, however, announced that despite the stories of looting and violence, there was less violent crime in Port-au-Prince, that's the capital, after the earthquake than before. Again, I refer you back to Trinidad. The report goes on to say, in many neighborhoods, singing could be heard through the night, and groups of men coordinated to act as security. Groups of women also attempted to take care of food and hygiene necessities. During the days following the earthquake, hundreds were seen marching through the streets in peaceful processions, singing and clapping. I tried to transpose that disaster to this area. And I asked myself if could have witnessed that mustering of the community spirit to deal with an unprecedented disaster. Port-au-Prince, the capital, is pocked with many hills. Thus, you can imagine the twisted, narrow motor routes, the congestion at all hours, because all the people who were destabilized on the plains took to the hills, crowding it even further, so that today, even till today, traffic through the lanes around the hills could take hours. I'm embarrassed to say that to cope with our engagements, which in fact the visit turned out to be nearly a state visit, we had to make use of the government-supplied siren car, but we didn't use the siren. The driver used that thing. But what I want to stress was that as we weaved out of lane, drivers stayed in position. They did not attempt to follow our car. They recognized the fact that it was a kind of emergency vehicle, and they stayed in line. Try and picture that scene here. Try and picture congestion in Lagos, not even going uphill, but just on the plains of Lagos, flat Lagos. Try and picture what would have happened if it had been Lagosians or Nigerians going up the hill there. But even more critical, when we got to the suburban areas, still in Port-au-Prince, we discovered that there were cows. Yes, cows are bred in Port-au-Prince, in Haiti. They didn't go up the hill to go and join the congestion. No. They didn't go through the street. They didn't even wander through the flattened buildings. They weren't munching the few farmlands, which were around the hills. They didn't go to the garden, the lush garden of remembrance, which is being cultivated, a beautiful, serene area as an act, a structure of remembrance. No, they didn't go there to say that this is where the action was. They were in ranches, in small Haiti, all of them placid, ruminating, chewing, contemplating the world in ranches. I didn't see even one herdsman. I didn't see one cudgel, one stick. How much more? An AK-47. And yet they breed cows there. So when I read of explanations for the untenable, Lake Chad is receding, so there's less pasture, there's less food. The water is drying up. Are we the first people to have suffered a nature disaster? Do we understand what it is to undergo the effects of an earthquake even? Nature has been very kind to us. So a lake begins drying up. And that enables, that empowers any sect of people to come all the way down from Lake Chad to Bayelsa, to rape, to kill, to flatten farmlands, to go to Ogun, to kill, to ambush people in Oyo State, in Ilorin. So what sort of Lake Chad is it that dries up so fast that it provides an excuse for destabilizing those who are minding their own business and providing food for this nation. I don't want to hear all these ridiculous excuses. Yes, it's a fact to be taken into consideration. Conferences are going on all the time to try and reverse the effects of the universal drought going on. Climate change everywhere is affecting everybody. What is so special about Nigeria? Do we even understand what it is to be subsumed under volcanic lava? As human beings, to find the molten lava rushing down the hills onto our dwellings, that we cannot cope with a simple nature phenomenon, but must take to AK-47s and go and destabilize the rest of the nations. Whether I was going to be carried out feet first at the end of it, that is, if I wasn't even carried out in a coffin. It was very rigorous. But this particular event, I remember, because it sort of summed up the thesis of my address. I said to them when it was my turn to speak, to give thanks, I said, today I've been subjected to some truly overwhelming accolades about my person and career, remarks which even extended to the country from which I have emerged and whose passport I carry. These remarks were made in English, in French, and in the local language Haiti, which is a domesticated version of French and has attained the status of a lingua franca. However, I continued, I find myself compelled to tell you that my presentation, that is presentation of me by all of you, so far remains incomplete. You have all spoken in 3 languages, but surprisingly, considering that you are all diplomats in one form or another, one language has been surprisingly missing. That language is known as diplomatese, a special language reserved for diplomats, international civil servants, and heads of state. It therefore falls to me to speak to you in that refined language and inform you that I come from the biggest shithole nation in all of Africa. I'm here, I continued, on a solidarity visit to a sister shithole, a junior sibling who has also had the honor of being so designated by the head of one of the most powerful and influential nations in the world, the United States of America. On this visit, I intend to see for myself if our little sister, Haiti, truly deserves that honor. However, minus 1 or 2 of the usual dissenting voices and constipated digestive systems here and there, I wish to assure you that we in Nigeria have fully digested that accolade and concluded proudly that we have robustly earned the distinction. End of quote. See, there is a confusion between the right not to be insulted and the right to feel insulted. The first is arguably close to qualifying as a fundamental human right. The other, however, the right to feel insulted, is absolutely not a fundamental human right. It is one that has to be gained through dint of hard work, a productive ethos, but above all, a respect for and cultivation of human dignity. It includes a sense of responsibility, especially towards the vulnerable of society, most especially children. When your children go missing and you are seen cavorting a few yards away from where you last saw them, you have lost the right to feel insulted. When you jettison all conduct that derives from and confers human dignity, you lose the right to feel insulted. On the contrary, you become an object of ridicule, individually or collectively. However, do not take my word for it. Just study even our media. Read and carefully engage yourself with the words of those who persevere even when they appear to have given up in despair. read the following, just sample, among hundreds of other lines from the national media of this past week. I quote, "Is Nigeria accursed?" that columnist asks. And then he goes on to give the answer, "I can't say no. But I am sure Nigeria is sick. Nigeria is empty like a vase without flowers. Some retrogressing forces won't just stop doing a number on her. She's not Midas. Midas was a man. Everything Nigeria touches rusts. When life-changing ideologies, products, concepts arrive in Nigeria, they die. It is curious, but this is the way we crookedly are. The interiors of our airplanes are like the sties of drunken pigs. Our highways are pathways to the grave. Our vehicles are coffins. Our telephony is bedlam. Our medicines kill. Our fuel fuels chaos. Our schools decline. The few products and products that remain true to form include arms, ammunition, hard drugs, prostitution, and yahoo, etc., etc. Is he lying? What does Donald Trump read anyway? Does he read? I have no idea, but we know that he does not miss reading Twitter. Now, who are the champions? The champion tweeters of the world? Nigerians. Nigerian tweeters. They violate all written and unwritten laws of human decency. They concoct, they degrade, they contaminate everything they touch. They manufacture events and occasions. They are the dregs of humanity. So when Donald Trump, who doesn't miss his morning tweet, when he encounters Twitter, encounters their toxic outpouring, what other conclusion does he obtain? These trolls of internet are tireless. Their energy and time are unlimited, and they totally overwhelmed the rational, creative voices that also use that facility called internet. They dominate the virtual environment. They compete to be the first to comment on any event under the sun of which they are abysmally ignorant. Any alien visiting this planet and logging onto internet will come to the same conclusion as Donald Trump, who lives right on this planet and breakfasts on tweet. Now, let us be careful here. We shouldn't talk so much about the messenger, but about the message. And no one is saying for one single moment that truth should not be spoken, irrespective of the messenger. If a Nigerian Twitter happens on truth and broadcasts it, he's done a service to all of us. But look at what they write. In all honesty, look at what goes on Nigerian internet. Some of you may recall details of a certain, because I want to make sure that I'm not presenting a completely negative picture of what goes on. No, we're just talking truth to one another. You may recall an attempt under Abacha days when we planned to march from Lagos to Abuja to try and pressure Mr. Sani Abacha to start throttling this nation and quit and go somewhere else. That's not me, is it? Yeah, I thought it might be. Mr. MC, always make an announcement because kill it and keep it. Happens to me from time to time. Yeah, you may remember that attempt. We planned it in Ikenne. Mrs. Sholari was alive at the time. And you remember how the kill and go surrounded the gym where we're making the plans, doing the organizing, etc., with maps on the wall. Well, what we failed to do at the time, eventually we had to abort it. That's another story. But I'm proud to say, to have read that some of our people have carried out that feat. They marched recently against corruption from Lagos to Abuja, it was sadly underreported. Very, very sad. If it had been a society wedding, there would have been lavish pages upon pages. But this is a group of people who said, we're in a shithole, we are going to clamber out of that shithole. And they marched. It took, I think, about 47 days, I was told, from here to Abuja. They, together with young organizations like Corruption Busters, I think they call themselves Corruption Busters, they are the ones who give us hope, who enable us to continue, despite the shithole population who occupy internet and some of the others. Now, the homicidal itch is also beginning to be infectious everywhere. Homicidal, that instinct towards homicide. Who's joined the bandwagon later? After Boko Haram, then Fulani herdsmen. Incidentally, I want you to notice that I never, in any dispatch, call them Fulani herdsmen until they identify themselves as Fulani herdsmen. If you check anything I'd written, because this has been going on for ages and I've written about it, I always refer to them as herdsmen. But finally, they've come out in their own right and said they are Fulani herdsmen. So now we are authorized to really call them Fulani herdsmen. I want that distinction to be very, very clear. We don't give people names unless they give themselves names. And after that, and the new culture of kidnapping, and armed robbery, and killing, and ritual killing, bedu, etc., etc., etc. It's sad to find that the houses of assembly, our legislative houses, feel that they too deserve to participate in this gory, homicidal fiesta that is overtaking the entire nation. And how do they go about it? They decide to make hate speech deserving of capital punishment. We are now to be hanged if what we say is adjudged to be hate speech. Oh, first of all, half the population of Nigerian internet users will be hanged. That's where they're going to begin, obviously. But you and I know that they will not dare, even if they manage to pass such a law. You know that nobody will dare hang someone for hate speech. No. The purpose is simply to silence criticism, to buy themselves immunity so that any act they commit or any suspected act does not come out in the open. And so they hold the hangman's noose above our heads. You know, life has become so trite, so cheap, that a group of supposedly rational, intelligent people in this world, especially a world that is trying to get rid of this degrading punishment called capital punishment, and they come and decree hanging. No, they're not going to hang anybody. They just want an instrument to silence speech. It's ironic, of course, that I should call on Nigerians to resist this law. I should be one to applaud. I know all about hate speech. And this is what brings us back to Donald Trump. When I foresaw the nature, it wasn't prophecy, it wasn't anything. When I listened to the potential leader of a powerful nation, Donald Trump, when I listened to his hate speech, and I said, if this man is elected, I'm not going to continue to be a member of this community. I received a bombardment, an orchestrated avalanche of hate speeches from the people of this nation. So you are complaining now that the same man calls you a shithole people? You make me laugh, KKK. He has only begun. He hasn't finished with you yet. For saying, no, this man, this is a flawed and dangerous commodity about to be let loose on the world. And that if he is, I am ceasing to be a member of this community. You in this nation, some of you among them, you launch an avalanche of hate language. But do I want to see you hanged? No, I just want to see you shamed. That's all. Because he's proving to be even worse than whatever we imagined at the time. Some of you so obsequious. I read some things, they said, oh, who is he? Why is he taking it personally? Wasn't it a political speech? It was all hot air, the typical hot air. But no, he wants to be sanctimonious. That's what I'm talking about. That's why I say we all need to look in the mirror. I just hope that in the year, because he celebrated his first anniversary quite recently, so you've had time now. 1 Harmattan, 2 Harmattans have passed, so maybe Harmattan cool air has cooled your brains, your little brains, to enable you to start thinking straight and stop launching into hate campaigns. Yes, it'd be a delight to see some of you hanged. It won't, you know that. So let's get serious. Let's get serious and understand that we have a problem not only of leadership, but of followership. Napoleon's forces were routed by our descendants under the generalship of Dessalines. However, Christophe warned. He said, slave masters never give up. They will be back. And so he erected this massive defense fortress that remains an object of wonder and study by experts in military architecture. Your friend, Donald Trump, decided to build a monument also to himself. It was to be a wall across the American landscape, keeping out inferior beings, inferior humanity, and he did not hesitate to define who they were. He mentioned Nigeria. He mentioned Haiti. He mentioned a couple of other places. So you see, that's why I accepted the invitation to go to Haiti to see our sister shithole nation. If Trump calls you shithole people, please don't complain. You have not earned the right to feel insulted. And if you insist you are insulted, I will continue to laugh, KKK. Thank you very much.